Hello friends, in today's video we are going to be talking about my art journey and how I got to where I am today with my art. So let's get started. So as all artists say, I've been drawing for my whole life practically. As a kid I mainly drew horses, and let's just say they weren't very pretty. I drew a lot during, elementary school and the start of middle school, but didn't really think anything of it, and it's not like it was a daily thing or anything like that. But when it came to craft projects, I was always totally down to do them, and I thought mine always looked pretty awesome. Third grade me was like, dang, that looks dope. My grandpa was a really good artist, and a couple people in my family are really good artists. My cousin is an amazing artist. She does beautiful paintings. And so it was kind of just like, oh yeah, we've got some artists in the family, it's cool and stuff like that. But, young me, I didn't really think about it too much. And then in 7th grade, I was like, it would be really cool if I could do art as a job. And I don't know. And I think I've always been really into video games and video game art, concept art and stuff like that. And so just seeing that, I'm like, oh, that'd be such a cool job. Like, I was just always super into it, and I thought it would be an amazing job. And so when I was thinking of kind of going into the gaming field and stuff like that, in 7th grade, my mom was like, well, you could always just sell your stuff. Like, that'd be really cool if you just sold your stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay. I wasn't really into that idea, because I was probably the most introverted person. I still am very introverted. Over social media, I try to exude more of a confidence and act like I'm extroverted, but I'm really not. As a kid, I was super introverted, and I didn't really want to be like, oh yeah, I should sell my art. It's more like, oh, I could work for somebody and do art. Like, that'd be cool. And so starting in 7th grade, I'm like, well, I should just keep taking art classes, while I'm in school and stuff. So 7th grade, I took art because that was the first grade that I could actually take it as like an elective class. So I took it in 7th and 8th. And then once I was going into high school, trying to pick a high school, there were basically two main options. And so one of them was more of a career-driven school, and then the other one was kind of just whatever, like a basic high school. And looking to the career-driven one, there wasn't any options for art, and like you kind of had set classes, and I was like, well, I don't want to do that. And so then I looked into more of the basic one, and they had a bunch of different like AP art, Studio Art 1, Studio Art 2 and stuff like that, and I'm like, well, might as well go with that one. So I ended up going to that school and taking Studio Art 1 and 2 my freshman year. And so when I showed up to the classes like back to back, my teacher was like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm a freshman taking 2 art classes, don't judge me. And so that ended up, oh my gosh, I love that teacher. Shout out to Mrs. Epperson. But yeah, I ended up taking those 2, and I progressed so much in that year. Like, I took my couple of classes in middle school, and they were good and stuff, but it was mostly just these specific projects that we had to do where they were very tailored and specific. But when it came to studio art, like, we actually like got to experiment with things and figure out how these materials worked and really brainstorm. Like, we had these specific projects, but there was a lot more creative freedom, and I learned so much, and it was just such a cool experience to get to do that. Especially when I had 2 of those classes my freshman year. So I was like dealing with double the artwork. And so I progressed so much that year with those classes. Like, it was just a really cool experience. And so my sophomore year came, and I took the next level of studio art. Actually, not enough people signed up. So I was assigned technically to studio art 2, even though it wasn't an official class. And so basically she just gave me these specific projects for me, which is pretty cool because like she wanted to give me the opportunity. So I was assigned to this certain class. I was assigned to Studio Art 2, but I was taking projects and instruction for the next level up. And this was the time when I was introduced to Running Start. So a few of my friends had already been in Running Start, where you take college classes where you go to a college while you're in high school. And so sophomore year is kind of when that was coming up, and I was like, that'd be a really cool thing to do. I could get my associate's degree while I'm in school. And so I ended up doing that. I ended up looking into that and being like, okay, yeah, but then I had to figure out what I was going to major in. And so I was doing all this work with the art and figuring out my style and how I could actually make this a career. And at this point, I was still in the mindset where I was going to get a job at a gaming studio where I could do concept art and character art and everything like that. I finally decided, okay, I'm going to major for my associate's degree at the community college. I'm going to major in fine arts after looking through other programs and stuff like that. And it was not the obvious choice, especially with the friend group that I had. They were like, what are you're doing art? I mean, that's cool, but like, are you even gonna make money? Like, what's the point? Are you just wasting it? And so that was very encouraging. But my parents were super supportive and they were super excited about it. And they're like, if you can make a career out of it, then yeah, do it. So I spent basically my entire sophomore year like prepping to be able to go into the college. And I was planning on being full-time at the college, finishing out my high school degree or high school requirements along with getting my degree. And so it was a whole process. But when I told my art teacher at the high school that that's what I was going to do and I was going to get an associate, she's like, well, why aren't you going for a bachelor's? Like, you're not going to get anything with an associate's. Like, that's kind of just a waste of time. So that was encouraging. But I was like, whatever, I'm going to do it anyway. And I'm going to get a job and all this. And I was super excited about it. Just even at the prospect of being able to do art as a career, like, not everyone gets to do that. That is it's genuinely such a blessing to be able to do that, to be able to do something that you love to do and not be stuck in the corporate hamster wheel. And so I had quite a few people being like, you're going to spend that time getting an art degree? Like, what are you even going to do with it? Like, it's not going to be that, desirable to employers. And I was like, well, I'm not doing it for the employers. I'm doing it for myself. And so my junior year and senior year, I ended up going to the college, Everett Community College, where I took an insane amount of art classes, along with ones to finish out my high school requirements. I had the best teachers, and those classes were absolutely amazing. The amount that I progressed during those 2 years was insane. I wasn't doing it for the degree and for the point where I could say, hey, I have an associate's degree in fine arts and telling that to employers. That wasn't my goal. My goal was to be able to learn and get better, because you may have a bachelor's degree, but if your art sucks, you're not going to get the job. It's just how it is. Like, it wasn't the prestige for me. It was just being able to learn and to grow with my art and be able to progress so far for myself. And so at this point, you know, going into my senior year, I was able to take pretty much almost all art classes for the quarters that I had at the college, because I finished up my high school requirements super fast, and I passed all of my classes. I didn't fail any of my classes because I wasn't going to spend any amount of time out of high school or an extra amount of time out of high school to get this degree, because I might as well be going for another degree if I'm going to be spending 3 years getting a 2-year degree, was basically my thought process. So going into my senior year, I had a ton of amazing art classes. Basically, the art classes that I took were printmaking, graphic design, painting, figure drawing. Figure drawing was the best class, and where I progressed was the best class, and where I progressed the most out of that entire time. The human figure drawing, I cannot get over it. The teacher was the best. She honestly broke down each week where we would work on a certain subject. So we would work on the muscles, the skeletal structure. We would have these live models, and it was amazing. because you don't get that kind of experience in high school or anything else. And just, I ended up with like an amazing teacher, an amazing experience in just how she laid out this structure. And it's not the same as like when you're looking up pose references online or anything like that. It was such a genuinely amazing experience, and I progressed so much in that 1 quarter of taking my first figure drawing class, and then I took the second one my senior year. It was just like insane how much I grew, and like my parents, when they were looking at my drawings, they're like, oh my gosh, like you've improved like a ton, and we can see it in just this short amount of time. And so it was just crazy how it took that one class and that one structure of teaching to get me to progress that amount in such a short amount of time, because I just worked at it. And the teaching process just clicked with me really easily. And so I took a couple other like odd classes just because I had to have certain ones to fulfill the degree. So I took a photography class, which is super beneficial for when I'm taking product photos. Like I still have my textbook from that class, and just being able to kind of implement that into how I'm taking my product photography. And then, like I said, the graphic design class helps me with all my logos and branding and stuff. I'm definitely not a graphic designer. I've had messages asking me to make logos and stuff, and I'm like, I am not a graphic designer by any means. But I have enough knowledge from the one class to be able to kind of get by with my own branding. But every time I get asked to do it, I'm like, no, just go with a professional. If you actually want someone to make you a logo, go with a professional. Otherwise, do it yourself. It's really bad, but I just explain to people, I'm like, being an illustrator and doing graphic design is not the same thing. But yeah, so I took my one graphic design class, photography class, and printmaking was the funnest. Like figure drawing and painting were like the most beneficial, but printmaking, shout out to my instructor Miles, because Miles was a real one. He was honest, he was such a fun teacher. He was awesome. We were homies. It was probably the longest and most hard-working class because it was a lot of physical labor, because they had like the giant printing presses and stuff like that. But it was so fun getting to learn all these things because I had never thought about printmaking before. And so when I actually got to take the class, I ended up taking a second one just for funsies on my last quarter at the college. But it was a really fun experience, and getting to do my designs in a different way. Getting to implement them into a different style of art was really, really cool, seeing them in different ways they could be portrayed. Or after my senior year, so I finally graduated, had all of my stuff done. I had to take one more quarter after I graduated high school of college classes. So it was just 3 classes to finish out my degree. So I ended up taking a figure drawing class, printmaking, and a business class, I think, or it might have, no, I think it was just figure drawing and printmaking, because with my extra quarter, I had to have like 1 more credit, so I ended up taking the figure drawing for that credit, and then I took the printmaking as a bonus, because if I was going to pay the tuition for that quarter, I might as well, you know, take another class. So I ended up taking the printmaking class kind of just for funsies, but that figure drawing class was kind of my final part for completing my degree. And like I said, the figure drawing classes were the absolute best when it came to my art. But so that quarter, so that was 2019. 2019 was my last, I think it was fall of 2019 was my last quarter. So fall of 2019 was my last quarter, and that's actually when I ended up working on my iPad at November. So it was right at the start of the quarter. So that's when I got my first iPad, the iPad Pro, after working for a full summer nannying. So after working a full summer nannying, I got an iPad Pro because I had done a ton of research. I had been saving up all of this money for it because I wanted to try it. And so the first experience I ever had with digital art with a digital tablet was the year before I started high school. So my 8th grade year, when I graduated, my parents got me a small laptop and then a Huon drawing tablet as a present. And so the Huon drawing tablet, I still have it, but it's the one that connects to the computer. So you would be drawing on the tablet, but then looking at the computer for drawing. I used that thing for 8 years, and it never connected. I kind of got like a little better, but it was just, it never got to the point where I was like, oh, that's good. Like I thought it was, but it was definitely was not. And so I kind of like phased out of the digital art like for the entire time of high school and high school on. Me and my friend were working on a comic, so I kind of did a little bit of stuff with that for the digital art, but it was like very rare and far between. And then I ended up getting the iPad after seeing all this work that people were making and using Procreate, and I was like, oh, that looks dope. And so I ended up saving up, like I said, and getting one. And as soon as I got that iPad, as soon as I started drawing, I was just like, this is insane. It was like the heavens opened and light shined upon it, because all of a sudden everything clicked so well and I was down. I was like, this is the best thing I have ever experienced. I am so down with this. Everyone was right. The iPad is fantastic. And at that time, I didn't even have Procreate. I was using a free app that I had used on the computer, the app that I had been using on the computer. And so I was using that, and it still was, I was just like, oh, this is insane. This is so cool. And then finally, like I think it was probably 1 or 2 months later, I got Procreate. And when I thought Metabig Paint and using the iPad was the best, when I downloaded Procreate, it's like everything changed. Everything changed. Everything was clicking. All of a sudden my art was looking so good, and I was just like, this is so cool. And so using that iPad, so I had that for my final quarter at college, I made this series for my printmaking class, which was animals with flower crowns. And so I made those. My mom was just like, you should like sell those. And I was like, ooh, maybe. And so then that year that quarter was when I was taking classes and kind of figuring things out, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. So I ended up with this business class in college, and that was when I started Natalya Creates and started selling my stuff, because I was like, this is really cool and I think this would be a really good experience. So pretty much all the way up until the end of college, I was planning on going to a game studio and working at a game studio, because I had applied some places and stuff like that, until I started Natalya Creates. And I was like, so thank you. Shout out to my parents for encouraging me to do it and being able to go on this journey. And once I did those animals with flower crowns, it's like it all went out the window, man. It was such a niche product that once I started posting on my Instagram, like, and so once I ended up doing that and starting Natalya Creates, I mean, I finished college and I worked on it, and I was up in Alaska working on some custom work with family, and COVID hit. So basically I was stuck up in Alaska for a month, calling my mom and telling her how to pack orders while I was up there. But I was working on custom works because I could do the custom illustrations while I was, you know, out of state. And then finally I was able to get back home, and that's when I really started working hard on my Etsy and doing SEO work and watching people's YouTube videos and stuff like that. Because before that, like for the full year before that, so in between college and COVID, I did a couple of art fairs. So I was selling my stuff in person there, but I only had probably like 5 sales on my Etsy. Like I kind of just launched it and left it. I had a couple of listings up, a couple of prints, which were just the ones that I had started with. And then, like I said, I left for Alaska, and then COVID hit. And when I came back, like art fairs weren't a thing. Everything was closed and everything was online. And so I had no other choice but to work on my online shop. So I got my butt in gear and researched like how to sell on Etsy, how to get people to see your stuff. And so I spent hours researching and I'm like, what the heck is SEO and all this stuff? And finally kind of adjusted everything, added new listings. And after all this work, you know, a couple months went by. I was marketing on every social media platform you can think of. And finally things started to happen. Finally, I started to get like random sales, like from random people, not friends and family. I'm like, is this working? is this working? And so that was such a turning point, because I would go, you know, I made one sale every 5 months to a sale a month, and I thought that was the absolute dang diggity dog. It was epic to me. It was so exciting. Oh, and with that whole process of my Etsy shop, like, my art just kept getting better and better and better. And I was working, doing all of this artwork and progressing my style. At that point, though, it had moved, because originally I used to only draw people, like, other than before, like, when I was a kid, I would mostly draw animals. And then it was pretty much all people from middle school, high school, and everything like that until college. And in college was when I did that series with the animals. And that was, like, the first animals I had really drawn in such a long time. And so then from the end of college all through my Etsy shop, it's like the beginning of that was pretty much exclusively animals, except for a couple of custom portraits, which, like, I had not done any more or any work or experience or had any classes on how to draw animals. I had 0 classes on how to draw animals. So that was basically all self-taught, self-learning, and I'm just like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but people like cute animals, so I'm gonna do it. And so that's, like, you can tell the difference between the animals that I started with and the animals that I do now, and how much I really came into a certain style of doing it. And then once I kind of got it established with all the animals, and that's what people were looking for, that's when I was able to kind of branch out and do more of the stuff that I originally was doing, which is the people and the situations and environments and stuff like that, because I was able to implement that. And that's why my motto was illustrations of people, plants, and animals, so that I wasn't restricted to animals or plants. Being able to have that freedom to kind of, okay, now that I have this established, I can kind of branch out a little bit and do more of the people that I like to do. And so that's when I kind of went into that process and was able to more recently, so like probably within the past year, do a lot more illustrations of people too. And being able to have that style of the way that I do the animals, it's the exact same style as I do the people. So it's really cohesive, even though it's, two completely separate subjects. Being able to have that cohesiveness just establishes my brand in such a better way. And now that I had that all established, I was able to move into what I truly enjoyed doing too. So basically my art process went from just, kid sketching to characters and character art. And I had an insane manga and anime phase in like 5th grade. So that's all I would draw. I would only draw manga, and this in the Japanese style. And so it went from very, very bad drawings of horses and people to very bad manga to semi-realism / obsessed with Burge Bugs art and Inveria, to where I was just drawing characters and stuff like that, and continuing into moving into the digital world where I was doing, again, characters and everything like that, to college where I was doing the digital characters, and then realistic people with figure drawing and everything like that, to the digital animals, moving into exclusively pretty much digital animals and progressing into a style that I really, really enjoyed, where I was able to relate them to how I drew people. And so that period was just a lot of animals, and then kind of like I would draw people for myself, but not so much for the brand. And being able to have that cohesiveness along all of the things that I enjoyed to draw. So it started with very, very bad people and animals to cohesive and good people and animals where I'm at now. So yeah, that's basically my art journey, and going from, a kid to elementary, middle, high school, and college, and how my art progressed to where I am now, how it integrated into my Etsy shop, and kind of the whole process of how I worked it out and how I'm able to draw everything that I enjoy, not just what the masses want. But yeah, I hope you guys really enjoyed hearing kind of my story and how I got to where I am today. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and hit the notification bell to see when I upload my next video. See you guys next week.